for Democrats to take the message to the people of South Dakota that we can do a better job than what we've done so far. In education, of course, the governor's emphasis has been on a laptop program that the legislature said specifically no to in the last session. I made the motion on the floor of the Senate to remove the $3.3 million dedicated to laptops so that we could move it into the formula, and there wasn't a single dissenting vote on the floor of the Senate. Not a single Republican spoke or voted against that motion. And yet somehow, when we turned out the lights and went home, the program sprung to life anew. This is the governor's answer to some of the problems that we have in education. I don't mean to demean the idea of laptops, and in some contexts they may be important. Although I would commend to all of you an article that appeared in the Aberdeen American News on Tuesday of this week that I thank Senator Jim Hunstead for providing to me and I sent around. It's an article by a professor at Northern State named John Schaff. And what he says in the article is he cites a book that has come out that points to 7 separate independent studies, all of whom debunk the idea that laptops are critical to educational advancement. And then he notes that in his search he has found not one study that suggests there is a link between the use of laptops at the high school level and the improvement of education. He then says all across the nation, schools are abandoning their laptop programs as a waste of money. In South Dakota, under this administration, we are expanding the laptop program with money that we didn't think was present in the Appropriations Committee met, and now it is. That is the governor's approach to education. We suggest a different approach as Democrats. It's not enough to be critical. You need to suggest what it is you intend to do if you're given the chance to do it. What we have said in the past few years and will continue to do is to use existing resources to invest in education. I've often said that the people who work at the Capitol building and here during the legislative session are all good people. They all have, I think, the state's best interests at heart. But you can divide those people into 2 categories separated by attitude. Half of them believe that putting money in education is a cost, and half of them believe that putting money in education is an investment. We're the investment crowd. They're the cost crowd. We're the ones who believe that there's a return on that investment every time you put money in education. It doesn't just mean teacher salaries, though it clearly does mean that. It also means infrastructure. It also means investing in children. And that also goes to the pre-kindergarten area, an area where this party has been unified and strong in the past. The Federal Reserve Minneapolis office recently presented a paper here. In fact, Senator Jerstead was telling me she was just in Aberdeen for the presentation very recently, in which they identify empirically a 17.6% rate of return on the investment in pre-K. 3- and 4-year-olds in nurturing environments, voluntarily, not mandatorily. That's the goal here in South Dakota. We can achieve that. That's not too hard for us to do. We're one of 9 states that doesn't have some type of pre-K rulemaking coming on the books. It's time we did, and this party should lead the way. We need to also be ready to deal with the typical tactic on the other side, which is to say, oh, that sounds well and good, but where are you going to get the money? When I talk to people about the money available for educational reform in South Dakota, a lot of times they look at me like, that can't be. This is South Dakota. We barely have enough to get by. What are you talking about? 7 years ago, the people in their wisdom in the ballot box in April of 2001 created something called the Education Enhancement Trust Fund. It is a trust fund from the tobacco litigation and currently has a balance in excess of $400 million dedicated to the enhancement of education in South Dakota. Its only purpose is to enhance education in South Dakota. What's being done with it? Well, about $14 million a year, and that's all that we spend goes into the base. It isn't an enhancement, it's a substitution for the ordinary and customary funding of education. And the balance, 80 to 100 million of it, which is available on a majority vote, languishes in T-bills and other instruments, while the chance to get a rate of return similar to K through 12 of 17.6% on every dollar we invest is wasted. Every year it goes past and it's wasted. No Democrat I've ever talked to has talked about spending any principal from the Education Enhancement Trust Fund. And if anyone suggests to do differently, challenge them on that. We are merely talking about the interest that's available in a trust fund specifically dedicated to this purpose. If we don't have the moral courage to do that now, we never will. And this party should lead the way in investing in education. Talked briefly about alternative energy, but it's so important and it's the future of South Dakota. Why is it that the state of Minnesota has 950 megawatts of wind power in development and South Dakota has 40 to 50, most of which is owned by Florida Power and Light? The reason is because this administration has been asleep at the energy switch, and it's time we change that. It's time the Democrats' proposals, which largely came from Senator Peterson, Senator Hansen, Senator Kolochik, and others, are looked at seriously. We can do that if we have a majority in the Senate. But until we have that majority in the Senate and strengthen numbers in the House, those proposals will not be taken seriously. And our neighbors to the north and the south and the east and the west will continue to exceed our efforts in this critical area. Alternative energy is the future for South Dakota. We all know that in our bones. We have to have the political will to put that into action. How do we do that? Senator Johnson talked at the federal level about the renewable energy standard. In South Dakota, the Democrats proposed the standard, the Republicans replaced it with a goal. You can have all the goals in the world, but unless there's a standard I submit to you, it's going to be a long time before our actual habits change, before we actually get to that point in terms of our development of energy. And second, we send exactly the wrong signal, not only to the consumers, but to the producers of alternative energy, when we do things such as increasing the tax on the blender pumps in South Dakota, which is exactly what this administration did. I don't care how you want to mince the words. Talk to the people in the industry who are being told they have to pay the increased tax. They'll tell you it's an increase in tax. It's not just a new form, it's an increase in the tax. Who pays the tax? It's the consumer who's paying the tax at the very point in time when energy is $4 a gallon and trending toward $5. Why on earth do we send a signal to the consumers of South Dakota, and for that matter, America, who travel through South Dakota, that this is a state that cares so little about alternative energy development that we're increasing the tax at a time of historically high gas prices? That's exactly the wrong message. This party should be for holding that tax at least as something that's revenue neutral and consider reducing it. That's what we should be doing in alternative energy.